And here we are, and I apologize once again. Had everything set to go. All systems were go. And I hit start, and the camera shut off. So there we are. I apologize. I know there were 7 or 8 people in the room already when I was ready to go. But we did a live stream last night for about an hour and a half, and everything appeared to be working. And so I thought, well, hey, this is good. So I set the live stream up today to launch at 1 o'clock. And about 5 minutes until 1, I thought I saw a problem. So I again, I I have no idea about why some of these things work or don't work. But Daryl Rose checks in, says things look and sound good. I appreciate the sound check, guys. I'm always curious because I've been doing this before where the sound cut out entirely, or occasionally we have the thing where the sound and the video don't match. But I apologize again. I guess here I can tell you what the problem is. My big camera is running into a device that runs into my laptop, and for whatever reason, even though I get the confirmation screen from YouTube telling me that it's using the correct camera, it just automatically just goes back and defaults to the integrated webcam, which of course is a 3-cent camera that comes on a laptop, which nobody in their right mind ever uses. So I've got a piece of tape over mine, of course, and that's how I know which camera is being used, because if it's using the wrong camera, the screen is blank. So Chevy Mustang checks in. Ironic as that could be. Mitch, Milo, and Michaela and Mitch are here. Looks great. Thank you, sir. And thanks for checking in, all of you. And I apologize again. Last night we did an unannounced live feed right around, 10:30, something like that. Yeah. And by the way, Daryl points out you can disable the webcam and device manager. Yeah, I'm going to do that. But knowing how Windows operates, chances are it'll just default to a disabled device. So I'll do that. Is the time on the laptop still an hour behind? Yes, it is. 12:02. Thanks for asking. Me, I always go off the Breitling. Breitling time is 1:02. So there you go, Eastern time. I am on the Eastern time zone. Merry Christmas from Kenny Briggs. Hey, Kenny, thanks for checking in. Kenny is a White's dealer. He owns a locksmith and metal detector store in Wisconsin. And he's actually the man who sold me my White's V3i metal detector. And Kenny's a good guy. Have never detected with him in Wisconsin, but I'd like to someday. Nico Charger. Hey, Steve. Hey, Nico. How you doing? Brian Jones. Yeah, next Windows update will probably just reactivate the webcam. Yeah, that's the thing. And I realized as I was buying this laptop that I wished it didn't come with a webcam. It just, my desktop doesn't have one, but this thing does. And so it's going to probably haunt me to my grave. Steve, your broadcast is in 720. Would be nice if you could broadcast in 1080 by changing some settings. I will do that. For those of you who don't know, I got this camera less than 24 hours ago. So in 24 hours, I did manage to hook it up, shoot 2 videos with it, and get it to live feed once, now twice. But I have not gone in and played with the actual settings. So I'm going to be able to go in this afternoon, actually, and experiment with the various camera type settings, exposures and shutter speeds and, film quality and so on. We still use that terminology, although it's not obviously correct. And Scott points out that he spotted the hundo. The hundo's not that well hidden today. I moved it at the last minute. Sometimes I don't put much thought into it. Nathan Miller, Merry Christmas. Nathan's checking in, I believe, in the southwest corner of the state over there by Berrien Springs, Eau Claire way. So Jane Grady, Merry Christmas. Jason, Merry Christmas from Westland. Hey, Merry Christmas to all of you, my friends. Of course, the winter solstice just occurred, I believe, yesterday or maybe last night. So we are now going to start having longer days as we proceed thence on the timeline. Chris Nemec just got notice from YouTube about last night's chat. Yeah, there wasn't much notice on that, so I apologize. That's why I like to have scheduled chats at 1:00 on Sundays, so you don't have to worry about getting the notices because those don't always happen. I'm 6 under. Hey, Steve from Olwine, Iowa. Is it Olwine? I'm probably mispronouncing it. I apologize. Tim Denhard, good afternoon from the UK. Thank you. Splish Splashed. Hi from Peggy in Rhode Island. Merry Christmas. Hey, thanks for checking in. Graham checking in from Sydney, Australia. Merry Christmas all, and Merry Christmas down under. Drone video. It'd be funny if you put up like 10 times the $100 bills just for those that look for it and ask them which is the original. Well, they all look alike from a distance. But you're right. I could hide more than one on the set. That would shake things up. Dylan's checking in from New Hampshire. Merry Christmas. Andrew Allen, sorry I'm late, but Maine is represented. There you go. Super Sad Cat, Merry Christmas. And Daniel M., hey, Steve, I love your channel. Thanks for all the great content. I'm wondering how in the heck we go about changing the civil forfeiture laws. I think the tide is changing on that. I think enough people got outraged about it that it's happening. So more and more states are passing laws. They ought to just abolish it, but you know, any movement they make in the right direction, this one's going to help us. It's been around for a long, long time. Bob Summers checking in from Oklahoma. Timothy Davis, my wife is thinking about getting her executive JD. What are your thoughts on an EJD? What's an executive JD? Are you talking about a JD program that's compressed? The question is whether it's a full Juris Doctorate that's recognized by bar associations that will allow you to, sit for the bar exam. And if you pass, you become a lawyer. I know there's such things as like executive MBAs where they have an MBA program with a compressed schedule that if you really want to buckle down and get it done, you can do it on, like, say, 3-day weekends and so on. A friend of mine, Tom, taught an executive MBA program. He taught some classes in one a while back. So, Merjam 100, why don't you own any muscle cars? I don't at the moment, but I'm thinking about buying one this spring. So stay tuned. I'm thinking about buying an American muscle car. Alan, what's your take on the movie Tucker? Tucker, the Man in His Dream by Francis Ford Coppola. I actually think it's a pretty good movie. It's got a few facts wrong, and it's obviously dramatized, but it is a very, very good representation of what kind of guy he was. And the story is fairly accurate. So Jeff Bridges plays Preston Tucker. And I actually think it's a pretty good movie. Coppola really wanted to tell the story fairly, so I think he did a good job of that. Benito Jr. Steve, you inspired me to hire my own consumer affairs attorney regarding my auto loan contract. You mean just to review one? That's not a bad idea. So Matt Sanchez, what do you think of Subarus? Yeah, Subarus are very popular in Michigan, especially up north, because so many of them, I believe they all are, at least the ones sold here, are all-wheel drive, which comes in very handy. And from what I've talked to people about, it seems to me that they're actually fairly dependable. I've represented very, very few Subaru owners. So Chris Nemex's muscle cars do have a bit of cost associated with them. Oh, yeah. That's, if you're going to drive a muscle car, it might cost you some to maintain it and so on. Brian Jones's Dodge Viper, which is what I'm looking at. And I suspect that the maintenance on that will be a little more expensive. And it's going to probably bump my insurance costs up a tad when I tell my insurance folks that I'm going from driving a Ford Explorer on a daily basis to occasionally working a Viper into the rotation. So, Funky Fudge, what are the laws regarding moving to Michigan from another state regarding titles, registration, insurance, and license? If you come to Michigan within a certain period of time, and I forgot how many days it is, most states have got laws like this. Within 30 days or 60 days, you're supposed to get a driver's license in that state and then also register your car in that state. And so when you come into Michigan from another state and you apply for a license, if you've got a car, they're going to ask you, of course, to register it there. And they will actually, ask you to do all those things. If you get pulled over by a police officer and you say, oh, I live locally, but I've still got the Florida plates on my car or something like that, there's a chance they can give you some grief about it. But I've almost never heard of anybody doing it other than a cop simply saying, hey, look, you really need to get this straightened out. And I know people who moved to other states. Like a friend of mine moved to California and lived out there for a long time, driving a car with Michigan plates that were expired. And he said that cops didn't bother pulling him over because it's like, what are they going to do? You know? So does Chariots of Fire by Vangelis, the theme, run through your head when you're running marathons? JJ CEO 40. No, you know, it's kind of funny. That song became equated with the pictures of guys running in slow motion along the beach, you know, but that's really not the one people think of. There's a lot of good running songs. I'm not really too big about, you know, Eye of the Tiger, things like that. I can tell you right now that when they are starting the Free Press Marathon, as you're lined up in the corrals, as they do the countdown to the start, they, of course, do the national anthems and all that, both for Canada and the U.S., but they also play music, and they used to, and they stopped, and it bothers me, but they used to play Right Now by Van Halen, which has got that nice long intro, big dramatic intro, and then, you know, it really fits the mood. A few years back, though, they took a survey and asked people what songs they wanted to hear at the beginning, and overwhelmingly people said they wanted to hear Eminem. So guys my age lost out to the young folks. So there you go. DSS, can you explain a habeas corpus? Habeas corpus is a legal term which literally means deliver the body or present the body. Corpus, of course, the same root Latin as corpse. And it is a legal term that goes way back to the Magna Carta era in England, when there was a time when somebody could be arrested and just held for any length of time by the local sheriff or by somebody in power. And so they had to have the right to, in essence, force someone who is detaining somebody to explain the detention. And in America, what it basically boils down to is if you get arrested on a state charge and you wind up in jail, and the state charge is bogus, or there's something wrong with it, or it's a violation of constitutional rights, you can then ask a federal court to review it, bringing a writ of habeas corpus, where you are, in essence, telling the federal court, I'm being held unlawfully, and I think a federal court should examine this case. And so then the state will then have to, in essence, explain why they're holding you. And it becomes a whole legal process. But you'll often hear about people who are convicted in state courts getting released on habeas corpus because a federal court stepped in and looked and said, hey, this violates somebody's constitutional rights or something. Very, very complicated. But Timothy Masters, who was arrested and charged and convicted of a crime he did not commit, spent 10 years in prison. And what got him out was when he filed an action, in essence, under a habeas corpus theory, saying, I'm being held wrongfully because my trial was so bad. And it was procedurally very, very bad. So there you go. Ryan Roberts' wife and I say hello from Lowell, Michigan. Lowell, Michigan. That one does not ring a bell. I'm curious about that. Where's Lowell? Alex Russell, Lincoln during the Civil War suspended the right of habeas corpus. And he did. And that is actually one of the stranger things that's not talked about so much. But during the war, and it's often the case that during a war, you can get away with stuff that you don't get away with otherwise. And so during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln did suspend habeas corpus specifically so that people could be grabbed and held and without having to tie up the courts. So that's a problem. Any update on the progress of your bookshelf construction? Yes, my brother's working on it. I talked to him yesterday, and he said it's going to be a little while, but he's working on them. So as soon as they show up, I'll do a whole show on it. So there you go. Ryan Roberts, Lowell's by Grand Rapids. Okay, that explains it. I recognize some of the suburbs of Grand Rapids, but not all of them. And I know that, that's the west side of the state. I don't spend as much time over there as I'd like to, but I should. So, yeah, Lowell's just east of Grand Rapids. There you go. So, like I said, I've been over there a few times, but not as often as I'd like. So, and by the way, people always ask me, go, Steve, how do you choose which questions to answer in the dialogue on the right? I don't. I glance, and quite often it's just I just see one and I start reading. I can tell you right now that you will do yourself a favor if you can shorten your question, because I can usually figure out what you're asking me. But when I see a whole block of text underneath one name, I'm scared to start for fear I'm going to get halfway through and realize it's something wacky. So, Merry Christmas, Steve from Dean. Thank you, sir. You passed the exit for Lowell when traveling on 96. Okay, that makes sense. JP says he's brewing 2 batches of beer in South Carolina because it's cold outside. I suspect that your kind of cold is not my kind of cold. Although, quite frankly, it's a little warmer up here than it has been. We're having a very mild winter so far. We had one snowstorm, had my driveway plowed one time, and it all melted. So there you go. Have I ever removed a mattress tag, JJCEO40? No, I have not. But my understanding is the mattress tag law refers to the sellers. Merchants are not supposed to remove the tag under penalty of law. Once you own it, I believe you can do anything you want with it, but consult a local attorney just to make sure. Jim Bergen says the numbers on the feed live might be low because the notice didn't go out. And I apologize. That's my fault. I actually set this up half hour early, had everything set to go, and the computer went and jumped and kicked into the wrong camera, and I could not change the camera without shutting off the other live feed and starting a new one. Problems with technology. First world problems, as we say. Jim Bergen, cold here in Florida is anything below 70. Where are you located, Jim? I'm not sure if we've asked before. I got friends in Florida. Kiki Lang says shelves, think adjustable. No. Adjustable shelves are for the peasants. I'm having custom made bookshelves made from my Oxford English dictionaries. I actually had my brother standing here with a tape measure getting it. I said, I specifically want these bookshelves custom made for the OEDs. There you go. So Duncan Campbell's pointing out that I'm under Admiralty law since I have the gold fringe on my flag, and you are correct. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm surprised more people haven't called me on that one. Acettle asks about criminal negligence versus other types of negligence. And quite frankly, one of the things, and this is such a complicated topic, I'm not going to go into that heavily, but you have to remember that there are civil causes of action and criminal causes of action. And in a civil case, people or entities sue each other with lawsuits, for instance. A criminal case is when the state, meaning either the state of Michigan or state of Louisiana, or the federal government as the state, prosecutes somebody for a crime, okay? So you have civil and criminal, 2 different, avenues in court. A lot of times you can have things that are both. So for instance, if I walked up to you and punched you in the face, that's a battery. I can be arrested for battery, but you can also sue me for battery. 2 totally different actions, but they arise from the same incident. So there are negligence actions, for instance, and if I'm negligent in some way that harms somebody else, they can sue me for negligence, right? But if I'm criminally negligent and someone gets hurt and the state decides to pursue that, they can prosecute me for criminal negligence. But the criminal standards are usually going to be very, very high because of, for instance, you're walking down the street, you trip and fall and you break your leg and you sue the people who own the property or whatever. But the odds of them prosecuting somebody because somebody tripped and fell on a piece of pavement, very, very slim. So you don't hear about criminal prosecutions for negligence as much as you hear about lawsuits for negligence. But keep in mind that almost anything that can be done to you in a criminal fashion could give rise to a lawsuit. We don't think that way. But somebody walks into your house and burns your house down. Yeah, they can be charged with arson. And you can sue them. You can sue them. Are they collectible? Who knows? But that's another story altogether. But yeah, so keep that in mind. Jim Bergen, Brianna CC, yes, but many know Steve goes live the same time every week. Yeah, the notification might not have gone out, or if it went out kind of late. Again, that's partly my fault, so I apologize. Jeopardy 4100, motorcyclists being harassed for attaching cameras to helmet. DOT requires nothing attached externally by manufacturers, but not consumers, same as mattress tags. Yeah, one of the things, and I don't know that much about that, but I know that a lot of motorcycle riders, and I've got a mount on my helmet for when I'm mountain biking. I can GoPro my mountain bike rides. And I've seen it before. Motorcyclists have helmet cams on, and you have to remember that police officers often don't know the law or they don't care. And so if they want to give a guy a hard time, they pull him over and say, "Yeah, that thing on your helmet's bothering me." And I've even heard people getting tickets for things that don't exist as violations of the law. So, it wouldn't surprise me that a police officer would say that to you. I once had a police officer tell me it was illegal to drive barefoot. And he told it to me because I was driving barefoot. And it's not against the law in Michigan. But, when you're a 17-year-old kid talking to a police officer on the side of the road, you don't really want to argue with him too much because he might find something else to write you up for. And so that's the problem with, the police officer's discretion. So there you go. Rod X, I got a GoPro on my helmet. Yeah, I've actually got 5 or 6 GoPros. And I've generally used them mountain biking and on my canoe and also hiking in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Charles Smith, what YouTube channels do you watch other than Sam Crack? I tend to watch categories more than actual channels of creators, other than I've mentioned before, but Agidmator, the chess guy. He's from someplace in Europe. His real name is Antonio. Agadmator. He's a chess aficionado. He's got hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And he is a really, really fun guy to watch. He explains chess games move by move. So there you go. Bart Oman, did you fight or pay the barefoot ticket? No, the cop didn't give me a ticket. He was just giving me a lecture. And here's my advice to you as an attorney. When a cop is giving you a lecture, let him. Okay? Because if he's going to give you a lecture, it means he's not writing you a ticket. Okay? The second you stop him from giving you the lecture is when he's going to start writing a ticket. So if a cop is standing there lecturing you and he's got your license in his hand, he's lecturing you, just sit there and nod along. Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, I apologize, sir. I will go find my shoes and put them on. Yusuf, I love that chess channel. Yeah, he's a great guy. I love that guy. He's got a great sense of humor, and he's got some great analysis as well. Do you support the First Amendment auditor community? It's a big community, and some of them, I admire what they do, and some of them, it looks to me like they're just trying to cause trouble. And, I've seen it before where a guy walks into a village hall or a city hall with a camera, and he's just like filming people sitting at desks, and they're like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm auditing you. And they're like, we're working. Like, so what? So, but when it comes to, there's something happening in the street. I've heard of this before. It happened in Michigan a few years ago, for instance, where somebody saw an incident unfolding on one side of the road, and they were on the other side of the road with a camera, and they were recording it. And the police came over and said, you can't record that. And the guy's like, hey, look, I'm just recording what's happening in a public place. He wasn't even catching the audio, which is the only thing you could really complain about in Michigan. Even then, it'd be a tough call to make. But, those guys, absolutely, they have the absolute right to do that. So it all depends. Yeah, it says, whether you want to hear a speech or not, Kenny. I believe, Kenny, weren't you a cop at one point or maybe not a volunteer, but you know what I'm saying, the auxiliary police officer? I seem to recall you have some law enforcement in your background. Kenny Briggs, my friend from Wisconsin, says whether you want to hear a speech or not, you might want to listen to it. And that's the whole point. You don't have to pay any money to listen to a lecture. You got to pay money if you get the ticket. So, yeah, Jim Stiegel, check out the Lockpicking Lawyer. I have checked his channel out. Very, very interesting combination of things. Lockpicking and a lawyer. So you got to like that. People actually asked me and said, Steve, how do you talk about the law and cars? Isn't that narrow? I go, no, go look at the Lockpicking Lawyer. That's narrow. Okay, so there you go. Can Chrysler survive another merger? Yeah, in case you don't know, FCA is merging with whatever the company is that owns a Peugeot, and it's going to become like FCAPGNAS or some such alphabet soup. I suspect they'll survive, but they might just lose their identity, and I'm not sure what they'll become down the road. Chrysler has changed ownership so many times in the last few years that I'm surprised they're still around. But, they obviously have a great legacy, although, Plymouth is gone. But Dodge still exists. So there you go. Travis, do I need to call the cops? I missed the first half. I'm not sure why. So, yeah, the third best NECA shop in your area says, while many record public events are doing so because they can, many of the auditors are doing it for a power trip. Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. I understand somebody actually saying, look, I see something happening, I want to record it. And there are things that have been recorded that we know would have been described differently if they hadn't been recorded. So there you go. Kinkajou, I remember getting a ticket for 15 over. I went to talk to the DA before my court date, and he threw out the ticket with a note from my dad's doctor who says driving medicine to my dying father. Wow, that's a good result. Yeah, I've had some situations before where people had really, really good excuses. And if you got a good excuse, whip it out and use it. Thoughts on the Cybertruck? Are you talking about that monstrosity that Elon Musk rolled out? I honestly thought he was trolling us, but I'm assuming they put it into production to clean it up a little bit. But it was a weird thing. It looked almost like a science fair project or something you'd see not at SEMA, but the International Auto Show in Detroit every year. They have a section where students build cars, and these are done by students at the local design school. And they're often very unusual, very strange. That's what I was kind of seeing when I saw that Elon Musk truck. So, Daryl Ross, Steve, do you see one auto brand more than others in lemon law practice? Primarily in Michigan, I see a lot of big three, but that's because they got a lot of market share here. And they are, for the most part, they don't really care. I get the impression that a Chrysler dealer, Ford dealer, GM dealer, if you buy a car from them, many of them just figure, hey, if you don't buy from us, you got to buy from somebody else. Who cares? And they all are equally flippant about it. I mentioned before that I actually drove quite a distance to buy the Ford Explorer I bought this past summer. And I drove past several other Ford dealers to get there. And, I did it because somebody recommended them to me. And it turns out that they came through for me really, really well. Will you ever have moderators on your channel, Roxanne? I've actually got a moderator right now, very, very low level, with one instruction, and that is obscenities and threats will disappear. So there you go. Kenny Briggs, law enforcement for 36 years and 7 months. Wow, that's a lot of time. 36 years and 7 months. I bet you saw a lot of stuff. We'll have to talk one of these days. As I get more and more stuff set up technically or technologically, one of the things I want to do is get my setup to the point where I can bring in guests with a split screen or something. I know it can be done, but I'm a lawyer. I'm not a magician. I'm just surprised I can get the camera to work. Okay, so we'll work on it. Yeah, DSS. Thank you for not blocking me based on my name. And I'm sure you noticed that I've only said DSS when I've addressed you because the F at the beginning of your name would make this an adult channel. But Rod X, define obscenity. I know it when I see it. And by the way, Robert Odell says Bob Maxey's a great dealership, and that's where I bought my Ford Explorer. Thanks for the shout out. But when people are muted in this conversation, I'm not even blocking them from the channel. I'm just kicking them out of the live chat for one day. I've had people on my channel post stuff where they get blocked. And, I haven't talked about this much, but people always ask me. But I've blocked a few people from my channel. And then I get these emails and they say, Steve, I'm trying to post something on your channel and it won't let me post. Am I blocked? And I say, yeah, you are blocked. But I usually play with them a little bit first. And I'll say, why? You can't post? And they say, yeah, it says you're blocked. And I say, oh, what was the last thing you posted? and they go back and they look at it, and they either come back and say, I can't find it, or I just never hear from them again. But I've actually had somebody come back and say, well, yeah, Steve, I told you to go screw yourself. I said, okay, do you understand why I might block somebody who does that, especially when they didn't use the word screw? And they go, well, this is America, First Amendment. I can say anything I want. And I say, yeah, you know something? It's not how it works. It's my channel. And, you know, I've got rules. And basically, I don't allow swearing. I don't allow threats. And anything that's vile or obscene will disappear. And I've had people thank me and say, Steve, I like your comments because they aren't filled with threats and obscenities. And I used to run a bulletin board where people, same thing. And in fact, I put a word filter on there wouldn't allow you to post certain words that no one should be using on my bulletin board. And I had a guy write me an angry email and go, Steve, I'm trying to write this word and it won't come through. And I go, what word is that? He tells me, I go, why do you want to use that word? And he's like, this is America, First Amendment. And, you know, I understand the First Amendment. I took a class on constitutional law and I passed it. So I must understand it to some extent. But I don't think the First Amendment guarantees you the right to go into a bulletin board run by an individual and tell the guy to do obscene and vile things to himself. So, you know, that's how that works. So that's how it goes. Dana's showing, thanks for the rules. Yeah, thanks. You're welcome. And so, like I said, I've had a lot of these funny emails from people who say, Steve, am I blocked? And I go, what was the last thing you wrote me? And they tell me, I'm like, yeah, you've been blocked. That's why. I've actually had somebody say, Steve, I understand, and they just go away. What's the coolest car you've ever driven? I drove a Dodge Viper. I've driven a Viper too, my friend. John Hagerman asks, what's the coolest car you've ever driven? And I'll tell you right now, I've driven 2 Chrysler Turbine cars. There's only 9 left in the world, and of the 9 that are left in the world, I think only 4 or 5 of them run. I've driven 2 of the running cars, including one owned by Jay Leno. I drove the Dodge Charger Daytona this model is based off of, and that's owned by a guy in Alabama. It's in a museum right now, but it runs. I've driven that car. So I also have ridden in Richard Petty's Plymouth Superbird that model's based off. I did not drive it, though. And I've also driven a Dodge Viper, 1994 GT Viper Coupe when they first came out with the GT hardtops. That was a very, very cool car also. So very, very different experiences. The turbine car is very unusual, very rare. The Bobby Isaac car, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I actually got to drive that. I wrote an article about it for Mopar Action Magazine. And then, of course, the Dodge Viper, I wrote an article about that for a magazine as well. I had that for a week because of an article I was writing about it. That was a press car. So there you go. Kinkajou, Steve, going to get in touch with another YouTube cooking channel for a Leto slaw video. I'm still working on it. Steve, you need to get a 1992 Yugo. You'd be styling. You know, I've been toying with the idea about getting a wacky car, perhaps, for instance, like, you know, a Daewoo Lanos. I've had several people send me links to Daewoo Lanoses across the country. And they'll say, hey, there's a Daewoo Lanos for sale, like in Texas for like $800. And they claim it runs. And I'm like, am I going to really ship it up here, hope it runs, and then just drive it around just as like a lark when no one's going to think it's that funny except for, you know, my audience will. But is that worth like a couple $1,000s of investment just for like a one-line joke? So I don't know about that. The Viper ride was like being in a stagecoach. In what respect? The one thing I remember about the Viper, at the time, I believe the vehicle I was driving may have been a Jeep Wrangler. And all I remember is climbing in and out of that car and being so low to the ground. And I understand other cars are like that also. I've ridden in Corvettes, for instance. But I just remember climbing into that car and then working the clutch, you know, and the shifter. And at the time it was all a workout, but it's fun because you're being propelled down the avenue by a V10 engine, which is one of the reasons I'm looking at getting one. If you want a guest on your channel, look up StreamYards. It's a great way to host a group chat. Yeah, I'm going to look into it. Like I said, I know there's technology for it. One of the things that I did this week, I've mentioned I've got some new equipment here. I've got a new camera. I've got a new laptop. Same microphone, but I'm now using this on the live feed, which is good. And then I've got a Black Magic web presenter over here that's tying it all together. And one of the things I did when I bought this new laptop is I bought a laptop that's got a ton of horsepower. And I'm hoping that this will allow me then to run the programs necessary to get all the other stuff to work. So there you go. Steve, Mike the Mechanic says you should get a Daewoo Nubria or Laganza. I'm not familiar with those. I just like the Daewoo Lanos because at the time it was a popular car and they built a ton of them. They sold quite a few in America and they're all in junkyards now. And it all goes back to a joke I told about 3 years ago. So there you go. Get an old IROC and fix it up. Now, there's several IROCs. I had the IROC Daytona RT, which I believe was the car that had the dual overhead cam engine with the timing belts that snapped like rubber bands. And I went through 3 or 4 of those. So, yeah. I was always tempted to get one of those cars that are front-wheel drive, though. But I was always tempted to get one and take it to somebody like Gas Monkey and go, guys, I want you to drop a Hemi into it and make it rear-wheel drive. And I don't care what you got to do to make it fit, but I don't want the body changed at all. In other words, I want you to, if necessary, cut everything out of it underneath it and just make room for 1 seat, maybe 2 seats, and then, a Hemi transmission to rear wheels, and then if necessary, like, tub them and bring them in. But I'd like it all to fit underneath the body of that little, I forgot what platform number that was or letter that was for Dodge, but the little Dodge Chargers from the late 80s, early 90s would be great with a Hemi. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody do that. I seem to recall somebody had sent me an article in one of the Mopar magazines about somebody who had dropped a very large engine into one of those things. So it's theoretically doable. JJCEO 40, will the Detroit Lions ever go to the Super Bowl? Yes, as spectators, but probably not in our lifetime because the current ownership doesn't care. Now, I will tell you, and this is a little known fact, I taught history at the University of Detroit undergraduate for a couple of years, Michigan history. And on the campus of Detroit, University of Detroit, is a historical marker. And I walked out to it and read it one day. And it goes, on this site, the Detroit Lions won the World Championship of Football. And so the Detroit Lions actually won whatever the big prize was long before they had the Super Bowl. They were the best team in the country back, and I think it was the early 50s. Maybe I could be wrong on the exact year. But there's a historical marker there, and that's back when the Detroit Lions played in a field at what is now the University of Detroit near 7 Mile. So weird story. But the Detroit Lions used to be good. Not so much anymore. There you go. You haven't seen the big block drag mowers then, Steve? No, I've seen people put motors on weird stuff. I mean, I've seen the monster tractor poles where they, some guys got like 8 Hemis, or some guys got some monster jet engine out of like a fighter airplane. Thousands of horsepower just to drag a weighted sled down a runway. I understand that. I want someone to shoehorn. Yeah, Jeopardy 4100 says the 1957 Lions. But the thing I want to see is I want to see somebody take a Hemi. I'm talking about a 426 Hemi, the Hemi from, that era right there. And I want to see them take that Hemi and shoehorn it into that little car that I was describing and make it rear wheel drive. And that'd be cool for me. Now, I can tell you that in 1969 or 1970, you could order a Dodge Dart with a Hemi. And they sold a few of those to the public to homologate them for drag racing. And it's like, putting a jet engine on a shopping cart. So there you go. No matter how bad the Lions are, you still have to look down to see the Cincinnati Bengals. You're splitting hairs on that one. Homie 789. You have to understand. And every few years you hear about some team that's just hitting the skids and just skidding along, doing horribly. Fans wearing the paper bags over their heads and so on. But the thing about the Lions is the Lions have been historically bad for decades and decades. And it's because the Ford family owns them and doesn't care. They make money. They don't care. Meanwhile, the Red Wings had been horrible for years, and they got new ownership, and suddenly they became good. The Detroit Tigers went through ownership change and became a good team. And the Pistons, of course, have had a few good seasons in my lifetime. The Lions, never. And it's an ownership problem. But again, while they're making money, they have no incentive to change. They don't care. So, yeah, last time the Lions won everything, there were only 48 states. Brian, that's funny. Oh, boy. Homie 789, Steve, I've been a Bengals fan since 1989 when they went to the bowl. A lot of hard years since. Yeah, I can imagine. Michael Clark, jet engine on a shopping cart. Yeah, believe it or not, and I have to look this up. I keep meaning to look this up. Back in the day, there was a guy who built it was a conversation starter, let's just say. It was a Hemi-powered unicycle. As you can imagine, that's the kind of thing that you could probably never learn to ride, because in the process of learning to ride it, it would kill you. But let's see now. Have you heard from Kim's mom after your video? JJCEO40 asks. And by the way, what he's getting at there is I did a video a while back about the weird instance I had where I moved and I got a new phone number, and I started getting calls from a woman looking for her daughter. And she go, look, I need to speak to Kim. And I go, you got the wrong number. But one time when she called, she addressed me and said, Steve, is that you? And I said, yeah, who's this? And Kim's boyfriend was apparently named Steve, but it was Steve Lopez, not Steve Leto. I think it was Steve Lopez. And so she would call like once a week, every couple of weeks, and just it got to be so annoying. And I kept explaining to her, going, I'm not Steve Lopez. And she goes, no, you are. I recognize your voice. Let me talk to Kim, And I know people think it's cruel. I don't think it's, but I started making fun of her to the point where I had an answering machine and I put my message on there and said, hey, this is Steve. Kim and I can't come to the phone. And then later on, the message said, this is a Steve Lopez hotline. If you're Kim's mom, leave a message. But, I couldn't get her to stop otherwise. Kevin in New York, Steve, call me immediately. Thank you very much for the shout out. I still get those emails. I stopped doing that, though, because I was getting sick of those people calling me 3 weeks later. And at first I'd say, by the way, when did I send the email to say, call me immediately? And they'd say, oh, it's dated 10 days ago. And I go, do you know what the word immediately means? But that was just one way I was messing with people who send me spam. So there you go. Lucky Dog Gaming, rest in peace, Steve Lopez. Jim Bergen, Steve, can you juggle? Yes, I can, but I don't have 3 things in here I can juggle with. I wish I did. By the way, I have a magic trick I've done, and it's the trick I do with the quarter or the silver dollar, and it's one of these tricks that it's really, really simple to do. You go like this, and then you open the other hand, and they go, wow. And I admit that this is basically a trick that you do for children, right? And so again, just so I can do it for you in slow motion, you take this is an Ike dollar. You take the Ike dollar and you put it in the hand, and you make sure, and again, because we're all adults here, right? So I can tell you, little kids love this trick, right? Little kids love this trick, but adults can figure it out. So you go like this, okay? And then what happens is you do this really, really quickly, and then people, well, it's not in that hand because you dropped it in the other hand when you're doing this. And I go, no. It is in this hand. It's not here. And so the trick is you only do the trick. You only do the trick one time, or sometimes you do it twice. Right? You show that you got the hand, and you go, okay, I'm going to do this one time only, right? And you know where it's going, right? And which hand is it in? And people always go, well, yeah, now that one, obviously, I know you dropped it. And it's like, No. It's in this hand. It's in this hand. But again, the trick is, like I said, you do this. You just got to get good at it. Okay, so there it is. But anyways, it's the only trick I've got. It's better with quarters because the quarters are smaller. Believe it or not, I had a secretary, didn't work for me, but worked for a friend of mine. And she didn't get that trick. She didn't understand what I was doing. And I would occasionally pull a quarter out and I'd go like this and go and pop it in my mouth and act like I was swallowing it. And she'd actually come over and open my hands up and go, where is it? Where is it? I'm like, I swallowed it. What do you saw me? I popped it in my mouth. I swallowed it. So she thought I was actually swallowing quarters to make her laugh. Fred Corrado says, question, the impeachment. What is your legal opinion? Would any of that hold up in a courtroom? And, you know, I try to avoid ever speaking about politics on here in any way that be viewed political, which is pretty much impossible to do. But the question you've asked there, because you phrased it that way, I will tell you, there's a problem with you, the way you phrased it. And you said, would any of that hold up in a courtroom? And the courtroom is a different process than an impeachment. And so if you look at the Constitution, okay, the Constitution has got different articles and then it's got amendments. So Article 1 is description of Congress. Article 2 is a description of the president. Article 3 is a description of the courts. And then the amendments, first 10 are the Bill of Rights. And then below that are other amendments, some of which we've actually revoked, like the Volstead Act or Prohibition. And so while you have the description of the courts in Article 3, Article 1, I believe, describes impeachment. And impeachment being described in Article 1 means it's actually not part of the courts. But of course, that's part of the problem we have in our society right now, is that there are places where people say, well, which parts of the Constitution override which other parts of the Constitution? But I don't believe that there's any requirement that the impeachment be held in a courtroom. It's being held in Congress and the Senate. And so therefore, Congress, referring to the House, and the Senate have their own rules, which they're allowed to make by the Constitution. So that's as political as I'm going to get. There you go. Charles Smith, Magic Tricks with Uncle Steve. There you go. Mr. Geopet, can you ride a unicycle? Yes, I can. It's been a while. But when I was younger, of the 6 boys in my family, at least 4 of us, maybe 5 of us could ride unicycles. My older brother Dave got one. My older brother Rick got one. And then later on, somewhere down the road, I borrowed theirs, learned to ride it. And I think I may have actually owned one at one time. I can't remember if I owned it or if I simply borrowed my brother's. But I was good enough on a unicycle to where I could get on a unicycle and ride it to the store and buy a bag of stuff and ride home without getting off the unicycle, meaning up and down curbs, across streets, could stop if necessary, stop and let myself down, get back up again. So I actually could. It's been a while. It's been 10 or 15 years since I've tried. I've got a brother who's still into that kind of stuff. I'm pretty sure he's got a unicycle. And over at his house one time, I actually did get up on one of them and tried to do it. And it's, you know, I'm too old. I can't afford broken wrists at this point in my life. But if I had to, like if somebody said, Steve, I'll bet you $100 you can't ride a unicycle a week from now, I'd get a unicycle and I teach myself. I could do it. I know I could because I did it once. So I also still have a skateboard. Greetings from Spokane, Washington, home of the Gonzaga Bulldogs. You know, if you'd asked me 30 seconds ago where Gonzaga was, I would have told you I didn't know. So have you ever ridden an old school high wheeler, Mike Gertz? No, I have not. I've seen the guys on American Pickers ride them. Mike rides one from time to time. And I'm fascinated by old bicycles and old technology, but I've never actually ridden one. So there you go. DSS, if I schedule a live stream, would you be interested in being a guest sometime? I've said this before. If anybody out there has a YouTube channel or a podcast or anything like that, if you have the technology at your end, I've got decent technology at mine. We can do them via Skype, or there's a couple other programs they use. I like Skype for things like that. I actually have a very, very good webcam, better than most, and I've got a really, really good microphone. I'm looking for it right now. I'm not seeing it, but it's around here somewhere. But I've got there it is up there. I've got a USB microphone that works really, really well for doing Skype calls and so on. So when I do my guest shows in Australia, for instance, I do those over Skype using my USB mic. Diep says, have you heard that scientists found evidence of ancient copper mining in polluted lake sediments from Isle Royale National Park in Michigan? Ancient Viking miners in Michigan. I had not heard that. There was copper on Isle Royale as well as on the Keweenaw Peninsula. And there was copper mining up in that area going back thousands of years, ancient mining pits. And in fact, many of the mines that were opened and exploited by European descendants in the 1800s were started on sites that were discovered by ancient miners or the native people who were here. And so, for instance, there's a mine called the Minnesota Mine, and it's actually Mines. It's misspelled, strangely enough. But the Minnesota Mine, for instance, is a famous one. They started because they found a big piece of copper that was embedded in the ground that locals had been digging down to and busting pieces off of. And they came in and they started digging right there, and they started a mine shaft. And likewise, the Calumet and Hecla mine was started. The rumor or the story goes, the man was out looking for some lost pigs, and one of the pigs fell down a hole. And when the guy went down there to get his pig out of the hole, he found that there was copper and broken implements down there of miners' activities. So, there's been ancient mining here. I've not seen how far back it goes, but that'd be curious to look into. So I will take a look about that. Steve, what is the hardest part of your profession? Charlie K. That is a very good question. And I'll tell you right now that a lot of attorneys do burn out, and they burn out, and you'll hear about a lot of them become alcoholics. They use drugs, or they just simply quit. I've had a lot of attorneys come to me and say, Steve, I heard you're making videos on YouTube. Teach me how. I want to practice less. I want to go on YouTube and have fun like you do. But the most difficult part about being an attorney is that if you're involved in anything adversarial, that is, I file a lawsuit, somebody defends it, that means that there's actually somebody on the other side of the V, Johnson versus Smith, okay? So Johnson versus Smith. There's somebody on the other side of the equation whose job it is to interfere with yours. I kid you not. And so that will mess with your head. Can you imagine if a surgeon had to go into work every day and do surgery while another surgeon was trying to interfere with him to keep him from doing his surgery? And that's what it often feels like when you're doing litigation. So that's why I like to settle a lot of cases if I can. And I like to work with other attorneys and resolve cases. But I've had situations before where I've had attorneys on the other side of the V that I jokingly said once in my video about fun with restaurants, about how sad it is that there are laws saying you can't punch people in the face. And there are some attorneys out there who are benefiting from that law's existence. So there you go. David G, why you ignore my emails now? All your base are belong to us. I would have to see what emails you're sending or which address you're sending them to and so on. They might be getting caught up in my spam filters, or I hard to say. I don't know. Alex Russell, the hard part of the law is delay. Oh, you have no idea. And I know people who say, well, Steve, lawyers enjoy the delay because the longer it takes, the more they get paid. Not necessarily. It might mean I get paid later. I'd rather have a case that I can resolve quickly, make my client happy, and if I get paid, I'm happy too. So, Jeopardy 4100. Everybody sends Steve an ugly sweater. I've had people send me T-shirts, but most people aim to get me to wear the shirt on camera, so I don't get ugly T-shirts. By the way, I'm wearing my Shepard Fairey shirt today. That's a design by Shepard Fairey. It's a bigger design on the back. I'm wearing it in honor of the person who said I was a Satan worshiper for wearing it, who didn't understand that this is actually just a bunch of icons used by Shepard Fairey, including the face of Andre the Giant in the middle of the star. Know that it is not a star of Satan. That is a star of Shepard Fairey and Andre the Giant. Obey. So, David G, I used your website form. You used to reply instantly, but now I don't get a response. Don't use the website form. I've had people complain about that, and the website form is there, but I actually have my email address on the website. Just click on that and send me an email that way. I apologize. I've had people complain about that. I've also had people say that they've sent me a response or an email through the website form, and it gets to me a day or two later, and I don't know why that is. I apologize. I've been meaning to just remove that from my website. Just tell people, email me. I don't care. I've had people say, Steve, you shouldn't have your email address on your website because you'll get spam. It's like, well, no, spam's part of life. And so I'd rather get too much mail than too little because people like this are being weeded out. So I apologize. There you go. Brianna CC says, hey, he has 100,000 subscribers. No more emails. No, I'll still read the emails. Keep them coming. I just have to go through them very quickly. JJCEO40, what shirts that you refuse to wear on camera? I'm trying to think. I've had people send me a shirt and they actually have said, Steve, I understand you probably can't wear this on camera, but I thought you should have it. I think I've gotten a couple that were political. They were a little bit too political. And you know, my channel's not about politics, you know? So, you know, if you wanted to go argue about politics, you can go someplace else. I'd rather talk about what I talk about here with no politics. So there you go. John Hagerman, I love the fact that you pointed out in theory in Crazy Town that the lawsuits could be infinite. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I didn't counter sue the person who was suing me with a frivolous lawsuit. Because if I counter sued them, number one, it would add some legitimacy to their lawsuit. Number two, a judge might be less prone to throw out their side when they think, we're going to be here for his anyways. But number three, if I can sue them for suing me, well, then why can't they sue me for suing them? You know, and I know that their first lawsuit was frivolous, but I don't want to lend any legitimacy to that. So I wanted to step out of that system and move it to another venue. Raph Maddock, hey, Steve, what degree of Freemason are you? If you have to ask, you wouldn't understand. You fools who think they're numbers. They are irrational and non-numeric. I would say avoid white shirts, especially with lighting. The third best Nika shop in your area. Yeah, and I agree. I've noticed that white shirts really screw the lighting up. So I tend to wear black shirts or dark shirts. Now, this is not a dark shirt. This is just green. It's more of like a mossy green. It's basically call your mosses, I guess. But I like the shirt. It's comfortable. So there you go. Have you seen the Ed Pratt videos about the guy who rode a unicycle around the world? No, I've not. But I can tell you right now that riding a unicycle is difficult, more so than most people would think, because you can't coast on a unicycle. So on a bicycle, I can pedal and coast. Going down hills is fun because you can just coast. On a unicycle, it's a one-to-one connection between the pedals and the wheel. So for the most part, you just got to keep moving your legs, and it gets tiring really, really fast. So Tony Turtle, hello from Michigan. Again, you've got to be a little more specific. I know Michigan very, very well. And if I don't know where you're from, I'll ask you. Will a movie ever be made about your life story? I doubt it. I've been in some documentaries. That's about it. So Brian Jones says, hey, Brian Jones, you spell your name wrong. There's a very, very obscure joke I will tell you about a movie called Pelle the Conqueror. And in Pelle the Conqueror, which I think is a Swedish film, but I could be wrong. Somebody could look it up on IMDb right now. But a little boy's name is Rud. And I believe the movie's subtitle, which makes it even funnier and more obscure. But Rud is spelled, I believe, R-U-D or R-U-U-D. And this little boy is talking to another little boy. And his mom comes out and goes, Rud, time for dinner. And the other little boy goes, Rud, I thought you said your name was Rud. And the little boy goes, yeah, she says it wrong. So, Sean Johnson, have you ever taken a case pro bono? Yes, I have. And I've also gotten a few cases that turned out to be pro bono because I just didn't get paid. But if somebody comes to me with a legitimate cause and, you know, it's something I believe in, I'd help them with it. Sure. Checking in from Davison, I know where that is. What docks have you been in? Grendel81. If you go onto YouTube right now and search Red Metal, R-E-D, next word metal, M-E-T-A-L. I'm in that one. That was on PBS a few years back about the Italian Hall disaster. I was also in a documentary about Bobby Isaac that was shown on the Speed Channel or NASCAR Channel or the Fox NASCAR Channel. But it was produced by NASCAR. And it's about a 15 or 20-minute long video about Bobby Isaac. And you can find that one also on YouTube. Run the name Bobby Isaac, I-S-A-A-C, Bobby Isaac, not Isaacs, Bobby Isaac. And NASCAR and Lato, I think, might even help you. But you can find that one. I was also in a documentary about Tim Masters called Blackstone's Equation, but I don't think that one's on YouTube. So those are the two primary ones. I've actually done some other work on a few that are being produced right now, but there's no release date yet set for them. I got to sit down and interview Richard Petty on camera about the winged cars. And that's a documentary in the progress. It's in the hopper, as we say. And I don't know when it'll see the light of day. I'm hoping we get it made, but it'll be a lot of fun when it does come out. Technically, this now is a documentary, but put it up on IMDb. Yeah. Ever practiced or had a case outside of Michigan? No, I'm only licensed to practice in Michigan, so I can only file cases here in Michigan. But I have represented people in other states who had cases in Michigan. You know, somebody buys a car in Michigan, has it shipped to California or Florida or some other place, and something bad happens, and they decide not to pursue it there, but to pursue it here because the defendant is here. I've handled a few of those. So there you go. Have you ever taken the old car ferry, the SS Badger? Yes, that's the car ferry that goes across Lake Michigan from Michigan to Wisconsin. And I took it to Wisconsin. It was probably about 1979 or 1980. But I was on a bicycle trip with a group of people from my high school. And we rode our bicycles up and around the Door Peninsula. And we actually took the car ferry over and back. And it was an adventure at the time. A slow way to get across, but a more scenic way than driving all the way around in a car. Gordon Kilna, what was the easiest case you had to research and win? I've told the story before about this is probably the easiest case I ever had. I didn't have to do much research on it. But a guy contacted me and said, Steve, my house was burglarized and my coin collection was stolen. I filed a claim with my insurance company and they're paying the entire claim except for the coin collection. And I said, well, that sounds odd. What's their excuse? And he says, well, they say I need a special rider for a coin collection. And I said, well, that's true. You probably do. And he said, but I have it. And I go, what? And he goes, yes. He goes, when I met with my insurance agent 10 years ago, he said, by the way, if you are going to have coins or jewelry or other things, you've got to buy a special rider for them or they're not covered. He goes, so I bought the rider and it described the coin collection. And I'm like, there's no way. I'm missing something here. So the guy comes into my office and he shows me everything, including the denial letter from the insurance company going, you don't get paid because you don't have this rider. So I'm like, really? Okay. And I filed the lawsuit. And you get 28 days to answer a lawsuit once you've been served with it in Michigan. And the lawsuit got served. And about 10 days later, I get a phone call from an attorney. He goes, who do I make the check out to? I go, what's the name of the case? And he tells me. And I go, well, you make it out to my client, but I'm curious. I go, can you tell me what happened here? And he goes, no. And I go, come on. And he goes, we're cutting you a check, okay? Let's leave it at that. So that's one of the stories that makes me convinced that there are insurance companies that will deny claims just to see what you're going to do. And we got the check. I filed a dismissal. They never filed an answer to the complaint. They had no argument. They just denied the claim to see if he'd fight it. We fought it and we won. So that's crazy for you. The guy could have just contacted the insurance company himself. He did. They denied his claim. And he called his agent. He goes, they denied my claim. And the agent goes, nothing I can do for you. So, Red Wing, I've met people that have never heard of Wolfman Jack. Makes me feel old. Well, Red Wing, Wolfman Jack is kind of old school. You got to remember that he was in his prime in the 60s. If you ever watch the movie American Graffiti, Wolfman Jack is a disc jockey that comes on between the songs and are listening to the music on the radio. Wolfman Jack had a long and storied and illustrious career as a disc jockey in North America. And I say that because he actually, for a while, operated out of a radio station in Mexico that was blasting a 50,000 watt or more signal north. And at night, you could hear him all across North America. Great, great voice, gravelly voice, Wolfman Jack. And he later got work in television and appeared on things like The Odd Couple and Probably Love Boat and things like that, playing himself. And then I worked in radio in the 1980s, and he had a syndicated radio show at that point in time where he was playing oldies and just reminiscing about it. But yeah, the meaty part of his career was the 1960s. So there you go. Steve Pratt, I literally watched that the other night. American Graffiti? Yeah, it's a great movie. By the way, American Graffiti, the producers of that movie, I believe it was an autobiography written by Wolfman Jack, or at least it's an interview where he was talking about it. And he said that when they approached him to do that movie, he was kind of in a tough situation in his life. He was between jobs, didn't have a lot of money. And when the producers made the movie, they released the soundtrack, which instantly became a bestseller. The American Graffiti soundtrack was just classic songs from the late 50s, early 60s. And Wolfman Jack's voice, they left it on the soundtrack specifically so he would get performance royalties from the soundtrack sales. And I read an interview with him. He said where he goes, the producers of the movie could have removed my voice. They had every right to remove my voice. He goes, it was not my contract that I had to be left on the soundtrack. He goes, they left me in there and they called me up and said, hey, dude, you might get some royalties. If you do, congratulations. And he goes, he made so much money off that. It turned out to be huge. So somebody says, hey, Steve, why is this person blocked? He is always respectful and polite. I don't know. I don't recognize names out of context like that. I would get back to the original thing I talked about half an hour ago, where I said, if you've been blocked off my channel, what you need to do is look at the last thing you posted, and that'll usually give you a good clue. So, but Red Wing says Wolfman Jack was awesome. Yeah, Wolfman Jack was one of the guys that if you heard him, you'd realize that he's the guy who inspired a lot of the rock and roll DJs. You know, the guys who were too cool to talk fast. And somebody pointed out earlier that he often co-hosted or hosted the Midnight Special, and that he did that too. And yeah, by the way, Wolfman Jack's real name, Alex Russell, points out his biographical information was Robert Smith, or Robert Weston Smith, born in 1938 and passed away in 1995. So, and by the way, Houtman 6 says, by the way, the stream looks way better than it did last night. Great job. Thank you. I'm just dialing it in one thing at a time, just one tweak at a time. That's how I do things in life. Although it was a big overhaul from yesterday to today to change the camera. But now that I've got it working the way it's working, I'm very, very happy. And it's going to allow me to make my videos even faster. Steve, you need an IndyCar die cast back there on the shelf. I need a lot of things back there on that shelf. The problem is space. You know, they say location, 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 but it all comes down to real estate and how much. I don't have a lot of it back there. So, do you use a special DJ voice when you're on the radio? JJ CEO 40. No, and that's actually a common misconception. I've met people in radio who do talk like this when they're on the radio. And you're not supposed to. You want to sound conversational. So you'll meet people who've got a good voice when they speak conversationally. And I've met people who have a good DJ voice when they lower their voice and talk like this. But you shouldn't be doing a quote-unquote radio voice. Now, I can tell you one thing. And that is that the microphone I have in front of me is an Electro Voice RE20. And one thing you cannot see because it's off camera is there's a little switch right here. I'll hold it up so you can see it. But there's a little switch right there. And that little switch is a 2-position switch called a bass attenuation switch. And I've got it right now in the bass attenuation position, which means that it eliminates a lot of what we call the proximity effect. If I get closer to a microphone without that switch, it increases the bass exponentially. And as you move away from the microphone, it decreases the bass. So smart disc jockeys will learn to speak at a good volume and get close to the microphone and then really, really let that bass proximity effect kick in. So an RE20 is good because you use the bass attenuation switch that allows you to move around like this without screwing up the sound of the microphone. But if I was on the air as a disc jockey, I'd flip that switch to the other side, turn it down a little bit, and get in like that. I mean, I'm not going to do that because now it'll blow out the speakers. But when I was on the radio as a disc jockey, there'd be a windscreen on this, and I would routinely put the windscreen up against my face. So I knew that that's how close I was to radio or the microphone. So if you heard me on the radio, the tone of the voice changes slightly. It's imperceptible. Most people wouldn't know what that is, but it's simply because I'm so close to the microphone and still talking a million miles an hour, but closer to the microphone with a little more of the proximity effect bass in there. So there you go. Somebody asked how many people are in the room right now. It's 407. 407. The best I've done, I think we hit 700 or 800 one day, not too long ago. But by the way, now that the equipment is working, this is a holiday, right? This week? I don't know about Wednesday night. I think Wednesday night's Christmas. Maybe the day after. Maybe we'll do a Boxing Day. But I will try to do more of these live feeds during the week because, number one, there are people who can't be here on Sunday and vice versa. And number two, I had a lot of people say, Steve, I really enjoyed doing this in the evening. It's a way to unwind, watch a live feed. So there you go. So what I'll do is, and I've mentioned this before. By the way, Lucky Dog Gaming, I'll address that in a second. What I'm going to do is I will do the live feeds in the evening during the week, and then at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday. And if you're not friends with me on Facebook yet, friend me on Facebook because I'll always announce there I'm about to do a live feed. I've got over 1,000 friends on Facebook, so as far as I can tell, maybe you guys are all friends of mine on Facebook. I don't know. Somebody asks about whether it's impractical every day to carry a Desert Eagle 50 caliber. And what's funny is, it probably is, but that's a cool gun. I mean, if you ever watch the gangster movies, Snatch, I believe, the guys are carrying Desert Eagles. The Desert Eagle is the gun that they use in the movies because it's so cool looking. And yes, you can get a Desert Eagle 50 caliber. And I've fired one before. And that thing, it would kill the person you're shooting at, all of their relatives, and it'll actually knock you about 20 feet backwards and give you a sore arm. So, but this isn't a gun channel, so we won't go there. Sub GR77, Facebook is evil. Yeah, and I apologize, it is. But Facebook changed from being a social thing to being a place where all the old people hang out and exchange like recipes and arguments about politics. But I'm just on there because I know a lot of people in my audience are on there. And I just said, friend me. And I put the notices up about my channel. You're not going to learn anything personal about me for the most part on there. I'm sorry. You got to come here for that. But friend me on Facebook and you won't miss the you won't miss the announcements. So Stan Goloski, I love the Desert Eagle. Yeah. It's a neat looking gun. Yeah, let's see what else you got here. A Gold Eagle is the best. Yeah, they make the Desert Eagle in a bunch of varieties, But again, the Desert Eagle is probably not the most practical gun to be carrying around if you wanted to carry it discreetly. It's hard to carry something this big discreetly, Rinman, what would be the number one law that you come in contact with that needs to be changed? The obvious answer to that, if you hadn't said that I come in contact with, would be civil asset forfeiture needs to be changed, no question. But the number one thing that in Michigan, our Supreme Court struck down a law we had in the books called the Consumer Protection Act. And it used to be against the law for merchants to rip off consumers. And in Michigan now, pretty much no law against it. So if a merchant rips you off and you catch them, you can sue them to get your money back, and you got to pay your own attorney fees, which means that if they ripped you off for less than, say, $1,000, it's not worth pursuing. So that'd be the number one thing I'd like to see changed. But that's a law that was on the books, was working perfectly well for about 30 years. And then our Supreme Court struck it down and said that it had some technicalities that were wrong with it. It was crazy. So there you go. Matt Mateko, are live feeds monetized? I believe they are. What else we got here? Canadian shopping fights are no MMA match, but often funny. You know, what's really funny is think back to when you first heard about the internet. Okay. I remember a guy in my law school class who had a laptop computer when that was a big deal. He had a Zenith laptop computer that I think cost like $10,000 and had the computing power of, like, you know, your fingers. I mean, it was the glowing green screen and the blinking cursor, and he typed himself notes in some program long before Word existed or WordPerfect existed. And I remember one day he was telling us about the internet. And we're going, but what is it? What does it do? It's about 1989 or 90. And he goes, well, it allows computers to talk to each other. And I'm going, okay, but I haven't got a computer. And he goes, but you will. And I said, what for? And he was trying to explain to us what that would mean. And the funny thing is that no one was saying, oh, by the way, it'll allow you to shoot a video with your handheld phone of your cat pushing the puppy into the swimming pool and then post that onto a thing where millions of people will see it in the next 5 minutes. No one said that. No one understood that. And I remember even when, you know, it wasn't until America Online came out and people said, well, yeah, but the main reason you go on the internet is you can send emails back and forth, and there are some websites that you're going to want to see. But even then, there wasn't that much stuff out there. And so it's fascinating if you go online now. And I saw the video on YouTube, and I forgot what it was called, but it was somebody who graphed the top 10 websites over time. Back when, like, InfoSeek or Ask Jeeves were in the top 10. And you watch how these things changed. You know, Yahoo was number one. And I remember at a time when you'd go onto yahoo.com and do a search, hoping you'd get a hit. And, oh, wow, I found a site that has something. And I forgot what the number was, but I asked somebody as a joke last week. I said, hey, you know, type Steve Leto into Google and see what happens. You know, and a fraction of a second later, you get hundreds of thousands of hits. Now, they're not all about me, but many of them are. But that's the thing. So the crazy idea was that no one really saw how much of this is going to evolve the way it did. And somebody asked, do I use Twitter? Yes, I do. So if you want to, I'm Steve Leto on Twitter. You'll find me there also. I don't tweet as much as I do, and sometimes I don't always announce these things on Twitter. So Twitter is kind of past its hot spot as far as my usefulness of it goes. Dana Schoen had one of the original laptops, a TRS-80 Model 100, learned BASIC. Yeah, remember the laptops and like Radio Shack also sold a computer. You plug it into your TV, and you could type out your own program every single time in BASIC. Yeah, and the bulletin boards back in the day. Yeah, JP. Yeah, GeoCities, Steve Pratt. That's another early one. But I was not involved in a lot of that stuff. I didn't ever do MySpace or anything like that. But, when Facebook came along, it's basically, hey, everyone can have their own homepage, simply. I forgot what year my homepage went up, letoslaw.com, but I think it was I know it was in the 90s, obviously, but I'm saying it was 94, 95, 96 when I got letoslaw.com. But like I said, I remember it was originally hosted by a company called Law Info out of California. I think they're still around. And my web address was lawinfo.com / Steve_Leto, So I remember in the early days of the internet, hearing an interview on WWJ in Detroit, 950 AM. It's a news talk station. And they had somebody on, and they sent a reporter out to a location where they were running some event. They said, hey, we're going to talk to the organizer of the event now. And so the newscaster has a microphone and says, hey, this is Roberta Jacina or whoever talking to the person who's promoting this event. They run this organization. Now tell us, what do you do and how long you've been doing this? And okay, if people want to find you, how do they find you? And made the mistake of handing the microphone to somebody who was then reading off a piece of paper, and they go, you can find us on the internet by typing in to your browser HTTP colon slash W I'm driving down the road and I wanted to punch my radio to make that person speak faster, and I realized it wouldn't work. For all I know, they're still giving the address right now. So there you go. Steve, if you want to help ease some of your SEO email issues, change the who is info through your host. I got so many things I got to do. Jay Harp, the video is slightly out of sync. There's literally nothing I can do about that. Right now, I'm running. This laptop is into a hardwire into the modem. So there you go. W. Dot. Pneumonius Maxim, search engines made quite a difference once they came in. No more writing out most addresses. Yeah, that's the thing. Nowadays, you don't need to know the web address for anything. Why bother? Just boom, type it in and it should come up. I remember, though, in the early days when you had a website, they would actually tell you to go to each search engine and tell them your web address, and they would then send a web crawler to check it. And once they checked it, it would get added in. And I can tell you that in later years, when I was running my bulletin board, I had the technology to look at who was on the site at any given time. And at any given time, there were like 6 Google web crawlers on it constantly, just constantly climbing all over. I mean, it was just, so the idea that you had to actually let them know that you had a website was how slow things were back then. Daryl Ross, in Michigan, if a terminally ill person makes an implied or direct threat, can they be preemptively incarcerated? Okay, I've seen this question several times, and I'm confused. If a terminally ill person makes an implied or direct threat to somebody else, and what's the difference between terminally ill versus non-terminally ill? And, what kind of threat are we talking about? So Mike the Mechanic says things are perfectly in sync for him. I'll take that. I actually watched the live feed from last night. I watched it again today, a day later, just because I wanted to see how it looked. And the sync is always off just a smidgen. And I think there's nothing you can do about that. I don't know. But I'm very sensitive to it because I edit my own videos when I shoot videos for my channel. And I actually do occasionally take the audio and the video and resync them depending on which sound source I was using. And I became very, very good at that. And so I'm a little more sensitive to it than the average person. But starting now, every video you see from this day going forward is being shot with a new camera and this microphone working together, as opposed to the old style where I ran the microphone into the Zoom recorder and resynced it later or resunk it later. So there you go. Increase the sample rate on your sound interface's input to reduce input latency. It's easy for you to say. We'll see how that works. Someone else says, I have Michael Clark. I still have a box of new 256 floppies. How many millions of those do you need to get the same amount of information you can jam onto a large solid state, hard drive these days? John Hagerman, Family Tree website, admitted to selling DNA and giving to police on request. Yeah, that's something. I think I did a video about that a couple weeks ago, but that's a problem. So many people have donated their DNA to these sites to run their ancestry that the police are now just serving subpoenas on them or search warrants on them saying, we want to search your database to see if we can find somebody who matches this DNA sample. And they don't need to find that person. They can find a relative of that person and then extrapolate it. And so many people who submitted their DNA never imagined it be used for that purpose. And that's what's happening. So I've had people say, Steve, did you ever submit your DNA? I have not, and I won't now. But then again, if any of my relatives have, so that'll happen. Alex Russell, can you dub to change something if you misspeak or sound smarter when people listen later, or to make commentators seem crazy? I probably could take some work, but I don't have that kind of time. So I saved my basic programs and data on a cassette tape plugged into my TRS. Laura Lynn Laurafield. Yeah, those are the computers that's talking about, the TRS, the Tandy Radio Shack computers. I actually had one, and I remember having it, and you could buy a connector, and it would actually store the programs on a cassette tape, an actual cassette tape, like you put, and then you'd run that into a TV set as the monitor, and very, very antique and primitive. So, floppy disk data can still be read today unless you had the batch near the end of the production. Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. I had stuff on floppy drives that I recovered just a couple of years ago. And I, at one point in time, I actually bought a little drive that was a floppy to USB, and just plugged it into a computer and downloaded all that stuff. But I got most of my stuff moved off onto CDs. And then I then did all that stuff onto hard drives. And I now have some very, very large portable hard drives that I back everything up off, onto. So, even in the 80s, we swapped games on bulletin board for Commodore 64. There you go. I'll tell you that when I lived in Bad Axe, Michigan, there was an arcade at the end of my street. I knew the owners really well. And I used to go in there and play Defender. And look it up. It's old school. The same era as, like, say, Centipede, Joust. Williams made it. And if you were good at it, you could put in one quarter and play as long as you wanted to, because you could earn lives faster than you got killed. And I actually played some of those games where I would have to leave because they were going to close for the night, or I had to go to work. So I'd literally turn to my friend and go, hey, Mark, take over for me. And when you're done, just use my initials as the high score. And he would do that for me. And I have toyed with the idea about buying an upright Defender. I actually found a store near me that sells them. They do refurbished video games from the 80s and 90s. And I'm tempted to get an arcade upright Defender and stick it in my living room. But I realize that that's artwork to me, but the average person it's not. So there you go. What was your favorite video game? Sub GR77. I liked Defender. I liked Centipede. I loved Missile Command, the one with the big roller ball, but I was never good at it. And I knew a guy who was so good at Missile Command, he could do the same thing. He could play it all day long on one quarter, because once you got to a certain level, you could just stay there. He was that good. I was never that good at Missile Command. I liked Asteroids, but Asteroids got to be frustrating after a while. But Defender was the one. I was so good at Defender, I used to actually wear a batting glove in my left hand, because that's the up-down lever. And I would get so into it, if I wasn't paying attention, I would actually tear up the spot on my hand. So I bought a batting glove, and I'd actually walk in there, put my glove on, put in a quarter, and then play for 4 or 5 hours. Cheap Entertainment, 1983. There you go. Just buy an old Atari computer and make an upright out of it. The problem with that, Glenn O, is that I need the control. It has to be the exact control panel. And I've seen guys who've done that. They've taken the control panel out of one of those old computers and made a video thing out of it. With the correct control panel and a heavy duty base, I could do it. But short of that, I couldn't do it because I need to lean into it. And I'm a big guy. So there you go. But anyways, guys, it is now 2:30 or 1:30 according to my computer. But because it's 2:30, I'm starting to lose my voice. I've been here an hour and a half. But this is the first successful Sunday live feed we've done with the good microphone, the new computer, the new camera, the new Blackmagic web presenter. Appears that I've got this worked out to where I can do this. Slight glitch at the beginning, but we resolved it. So we're going to wrap it up. I will talk to you again soon. As always, the videos go up 2 a day. Keep watching, keep commenting, questions, comments. Put them below or email me. If you're having trouble getting to me through the form on my website, don't use it. Use my email, steve@letoslaw.com or leto@kennan.com. I will talk to you later. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, and Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.